Hello and welcome to Misheard Song Lyrics. We're at Season 2, Episode 87. And amazingly, this is our first misheard song lyric that we're going to do on the famous Bob Dylan. The misheard song lyric is, "The ants are my friends, they're blowing in the wind." And the correct lyrics is, "The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind." Pretty close, pretty close. And I thought for years it was about ants blowing in the wind. Okay, so Blowing in the Wind is a song written by Bob Dylan back in 1962 and was released as a single that was included in his album called The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan in 1963. Some have described it as a protest song, and it has a series of rhetorical questions in this song. So listen to the lyrics if you haven't, just Google it, about peace, war, and freedom. The refrain, "The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind," has been described by most as ambiguous. You can kind of insert your own understanding of the song, or that the answer is so obvious that it's right in your face. Which is as intangible as the wind. So, like my mom used to say, it's so close to you, a snake would bite you. And so it could be one of two things. So that's why the song has always, been questioned by a lot of folks. And then back in 1994, the song was inducted to the Grammy Hall of Fame. It ranked number 14, also in that same year, 2004, on the Rolling Stone magazine's list of 500 greatest songs of all time. That's pretty big. It made it in the top 20 on number 14. So let's start, because I know there's probably a lot of you listeners out there that may have heard of Bob Dylan, but didn't really know anything about him, or some young ears that, it's the first time you've ever even heard about who this Bob Dylan is. For those that have known him as long as I have, but I still don't know him that well, I've known him for his distinct singing voice that is sometimes hard to understand and kind of mumbly, which is perfect for this show of misheard song lyrics. So Bob Dylan, was that his real name? Actually, no, his full real name was Robert Allen Zimmerman, and he was born back on May 24th, 1941. So he is probably a fellow Taurus like I. My birthday's next week. Just a little plug there. And he is still with us, thank God, American singer, songwriter, author, and they say visual artist, and regarded as one of the greatest songwriters of all time. And he is also a major figure in pop culture of more than 50 years. So if you don't even know all his songs, you can pretty much identify him. He also has a very distinct look as well. And much of his celebrated work dates from 1960, starting with, of course, what we're talking about today, Blowing in the Wind from 1963, and The Times They Are Changing in 1964, because both are what they most have considered as anthems for civil rights and anti-war movements. And then just a little side note, we're in 2021, and these songs can still be sung today, unfortunately, with what we're going through. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And his lyrics during the period incorporated a range of political, social, philosophical, and literary influences defined pop music conventions at the time, and some have at that time called it counterculture. Since 1994, Dylan has published 8 books of drawings and paintings that I did not know, and his work has been exhibited in major art galleries. So I'll need to Google that and see what his pictures look like. He also sold more than 100 million records, making him one of the best-selling music artists of all time. He's received numerous awards, as well as the Presidential Medal of Freedom, 10 Grammy Awards, a Golden Globe, and Academy Award. And he is, of course, no surprise, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, and the Songwriters Hall of Fame. And, big did you know, the Pulitzer Prize Board in 2008 awarded him a special citation for what they say, quote unquote, the profound impact on popular music and American culture, marked by lyrical compositions of extraordinary poetic power. So I think he's probably the only one I know, singer-songwriter, that has received a Pulitzer Prize special citation. They actually call it also the Nobel Prize. In 2016. So in addition to that, Dylan was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature for having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition. So he is a man of many talents. So a little bit about Bob Dylan. What's the song about? Is it ants blowing in the wind? What is the answer? We don't know. Well, Dylan originally wrote it and performed a 2-verse version of the song. It's the first public performance to date at a Gerde's Folk City on April 16th, 1962, and was recorded and circulated among Dylan collectors. I bet you that's worth a pretty penny. Shortly after that performance, he added the middle verse to the song. Some published versions of the lyrics reverse the order of the second and third verses, apparently because Dylan simply appended the middle verse to his original manuscript rather than writing out a new copy with the verses in proper order. Again, like I talked about in the last episode in 86, all these errors, as we would consider them, end up being gold mines for the song. So the next Did You Know too is the theme may have been taken from a passage in Woody Guthrie's autobiography Bound for Glory, which Woody Guthrie himself has some very, very amazing songs. And, you think, oh, it's about this. And then you really look into the words and you're like, oh, wow, it's really deeper than that. In which Guthrie compared his political sensibility to newspapers blowing in the winds of New York City streets and alleys. Dylan was certainly familiar with Guthrie's work. His reading of it has been a major turning point in his intellectual and political development. So that was probably who he looked up to. In June of 1962, the song was published in Sing Out with an exclamation point mark, accompanied by Dylan's comments. This is what Mr. Dylan said. There ain't too much I can say about this song except that the answer is blowing in the wind. It ain't in no book or movie or TV show or discussion group. Man, it's in the wind and it's blowing in the wind. Too many of these hip people are telling me the answer is, but I won't believe that. I still say it's in the wind, and just like a restless piece of paper, it's got to come down some. But the only trouble is that no one picks up the answer when it comes down. Not too many people get to see a no, and then it flies away, just like that paper, right? I still say that some of the biggest criminals are those that turn their heads away when they see wrong and know it's wrong. I'm only 21 years old, and I know that there's been too many wars. You people over 21, you're older and smarter. Wow. Again, that quote could be said today, ironically, in 2021. So Dylan recorded Blowing in the Wind on July 9th, 1962 for the inclusion, like I said, of his Free Will and Bob Dylan album in 1963. It's, again, described by many as a civil rights movement. And actually Martin Scorsese, famous director, on a documentary on Dylan called No Direction Home, and Mavis Staples expressed her astonishment on first hearing the song and said she could not understand how a young white man could write something that captured the frustration and aspirations of Black people so powerfully. Sam Cooke was similarly deeply impressed by the song, incorporated to his repertoire soon after his release, a version that could be included on the Sam Cooke at the Copa, and being inspired by it to write A Change Is Gonna Come. So like I said, this song, if you haven't heard it recently, just listen to it, especially with all that's happened in the last week with some, major decisions from a jury and the unrest that we're dealing with right now. The Did You Know Part 3 is the song was actually covered by a group called the Chad Mitchell Trio, but their record company delayed the release of the album because it contained the word death in it, which back in, I guess, in the 60s, woo, scary. So the trio lost out to Peter, Paul, and Mary, who were represented by Dylan's manager, Albert Grossman. So he said, hey, you should do a cover of this too. The single sold a phenomenal 300,000 copies in the first week of release and made the song world famous. And I've also heard of the Peter, Paul, and Mary, and I've known it that way and then found out about Bob Dylan being the original and the writer. On August 17th, 1963, it reached number 2 on the Billboard Pop Chart with sales exceeding 1 million copies. Can you imagine 1 million copies back then in the 60s? That's phenomenal. And Peter Yarrow, Peter, Paul, and Mary recalled that when he told Dylan he would make more than $5,000, which is back then equivalent to a 2019 figure of $42,000 from the publishing rights, Dylan was speechless. He had no idea. He was like, oh, I just wrote the song. I sang it. Great. Oh, you want to sing it? Oh, great. Oh, I get paid for it too? Sweet. So Peter, Paul, and Mary's version of the song also spent 5 weeks atop the easy listening charts. And then Did You Know 4, this was interesting. I found this, and of course, this claim was eventually figured out to be untrue, but it was said that the song supposedly was written by a high school student named Laura Wyatt, a member of Milbourne High School's Milbonaries, an all-male folk band, and had subsequently purchased or plagiarized by Dylan before he gained fame, was reported in some article in Newsweek back in November of 63. And like I said, after much review by others, the plagiarism claim was eventually shown to be untrue. So we now know about who Bob Dylan is, about what the song was about, how it's done so well, even as a cover. Let's talk about the legacy, because this is a song you do hear throughout pulp culture. The first line of the song, how many roads must a man walk down? How many roads must a man walk down? Is proposed as the ultimate question in the science fiction novel The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. And I know this book very well because I used to work at a bookstore during my college days in San Diego, California, in the US. Sold a lot of these books. And then in 1994, famous movie called Forrest Gump. In there, his love interest, Jenny sings the song for a show in a strip club when she starts going downhill and is introduced as Bobby Dylan, but Bobby with an I. The film's soundtrack album features the Joan Baez 1976 live recording the song from her album From Every Stage. So again, another cover there from someone famous. And because these words are timeless, apparently the protests against the Iraq war, so that's pretty recent, last several years, commentators noted that protesters were resurrecting songs like this song, Blowing in the Wind, rather than creating new ones. So again, it transcends many decades. So covers, I talked about the Peter, Paul, and Mary cover, as well as the cover that would have happened when Chad Mitchell Trio had their record company not delayed it because of the word death in it. But there's others. So there were hundreds of artists. Of course, we know about the very popular and successful one of Peter, Paul, and Mary in June of 63, 3 weeks after Bob Dylan actually issued his version, or his original version. And Albert Grossman, the manager both of Dylan and Peter, Paul, and Mary that I mentioned earlier, said, probably recorded this version, I guess, of the Peter, Paul, and Mary cover version on a single take, which is amazing. The trio's version, which was the title track of their third album, peaked at number 2 on the Billboard charts behind Fingertips by Stevie Wonder. And the group's version also went to number 1 on the Middle Road charts for 5 weeks. And another interesting thing, because we're going to hear about Stevie Wonder again, did you know 5 is in 1966, Stevie Wonder recorded his own, which became a top 10 hit on the Billboard Hot 100, as well as number 1 on the R&B charts. I didn't know he had a version, which I think is interesting because we just found out that when the Peter, Paul, and Mary version was out, they were number 2 after a Stevie Wonder song called Fingertips. And then last but not least, did you know number 6, famous actress Marlene Dietrich recorded a German version of the song titled, okay, I'm going to try it, Die Antwort weiß ganz allen der Wind, which peaked at number 32 in the German charts. So it even did well in the German charts. This is how amazing this song is. I'm going to have to re-listen to it again. But I hope you learned a lot. I did. Thank you, Bob Dylan. Thank you for the ants. Maybe they are the answers that are blowing in the wind. But if you have any good examples like this came from one of our listeners. Thank you, Mary, ironically, is her name. Then please send them to misheard song lyrics. That's MISSHEARD songs @gmail.com, or you can send it to our Facebook, our Instagram, our tweet, Twitter, whatever. Go ahead and send it that way as well, and we'd love to hear from you. So always keep singing those songs wrong. Bye!